All right, everyone, we have a big win today. Donald Trump has officially come out and called for the legalization of marijuana, saying that people shouldn't have their lives ruined for smoking a goddamn dime bag. This is exactly what I want. Now, I noticed that there are some conservatives, and I'm not one, that are like, no, Trump, no, don't turn the red states into blue states. Don't legalize the devil's reefer, basically, the devil's lettuce. It's pot. Most of you have used it. Don't be a goddamn hypocrite. Don't pretend that you haven't smoked a joint or smoked a hit off a bowl when you were in college or something like that. Most of you did. And that's just the long and short of it. Marijuana, as I explained the other day, is ultimately, it can be a problem. A person can be habituated to it. They can end up dependent on it to the extent that, like, you know, they're smoking weed every day, quite literally. Who cares? If a person drinks every day, we say, well, you're an alcoholic, but we don't try to ban it. If a person smokes all the time, we say, well, you're addicted to tobacco, but we don't ban tobacco sales or anything like that. We try to ban it in public places. The same should be true of weed, by the way. You should not be exposed to it against your will. But if a person's on their own property and they're simply smoking a bowl, there is nothing wrong with that. There's literally nothing wrong with smoking marijuana. I've used it in the past. I used it semi-frequently. I never got as much into that as I did into psychedelics. I was more of morning glory seeds and LSD and stuff like that. I preferred the psychedelics over weed. But I've used weed. I had like OG Kush, Blueberry Kush, Lemon Haze was the best. That's the most giggly weed. White Widow knocked me on the fucking ground, literally. I smoked a little bit too much of that, and I was literally on the floor laughing my ass off. Then I spent a couple of hours watching grindcore videos. And that's what weed does to you. It potentiates music. It makes you hungry sometimes, or makes you pass out. You shouldn't drive while under the influence of any drug, let alone marijuana. That's not a good idea. You shouldn't operate machinery, and you shouldn't expose other people to it in a public space. So you shouldn't be able to go down the street, although you can do this in the Netherlands, and people sometimes do. You shouldn't be able to walk down the street just randomly toking. There could be a kid around or something like that. You're exposing them to THC. That should be illegal. Beyond that, though, if you want to grow a couple of weed plants, if you want to smoke it or something like that, you should be able to do so. It's fucking marijuana. Goddamn, more than half of the population has fucking used it. Don't be a fucking hypocrite. People get older, and they get all moralistic sometimes. And they're like, well, back in my youth, I smoked reefer, but now I'm 50, and people shouldn't be allowed to enjoy it anymore. Okay, well, just because you're an old fogey doesn't mean that other people shouldn't be able to smoke fucking reefer. By the way, they don't use that term anymore. I'm sure that Gen Z has some sort of interesting term for marijuana. Who knows what it is? I don't know. I'm not hip with the kids as much. It's marijuana. It is a drug. It does get you high. That's sort of the point. You shouldn't be driving around on it. You shouldn't be using it in public around other people who may not want the smell of that smoke. The same is true of tobacco. That's perfectly fine. But if you're on your own property or anything like that, you should be able to fucking smoke it. Trump is coming out. He's coming out on the right side of history with this one. And this is very atypical, by the way, for a Republican. I have weighed in before on Trump's views on marijuana. He came out in favor, for example, of medical marijuana before most Democrats did. He's arguably a progressive on this particular issue. And it's very strange to see a Republican acting proactively and going out ahead of an issue and making it clear, hey, now I don't want to jail you. Just don't smoke it in public, grow your own plant and smoke it in your backyard. That's actually very, very strange for a Republican candidate. It's also a heavy hitter with regards to public policy. There are a lot of people out there that want to use marijuana. Some of them use it occasionally, some of them use it, on a regular basis, and then some people use it for pain relief or something like that. They're like, I've got chemotherapy, So I smoke marijuana because otherwise I literally can't eat. I will waste away and die. Medical marijuana is something that Trump embraced back in the 2000s, if I remember correctly. It might have even been the 1990s, actually, that he weighed in on that. He said, well, I've got some friends that have medical marijuana, and, it's a drug, but it's also a medicine. And, they use it, and I don't think they should go to jail for it. He was out ahead of this issue by 20 goddamn years. The Obama administration was still raiding dispensaries in places like Montana, and then finally, because of public outcry, they backed off of doing that, was still violating that right when Donald Trump was saying, smoke the reefer. It's all good, Just don't smoke too much of it or go driving, limit yourself, couple of hits, you giggle a little bit, you eat a Twinkie, you watch a movie, and you fall asleep. What the fuck is wrong with this substance? I don't understand. And there are some people out there, I know that I'm going to get crucified in the comments section by a few people. They'll say, like, pot makes you lazy, for example. I can attest, personally, pot don't make you lazy. If anything, if you're smoking the right blend, it makes you work fucking harder. And you enjoy it more. I don't see the problem with this. That seems like it's in keeping with good capitalism, actually. Weed is not a problem in society. Illegal weed is. Black market weed that's laced with fentanyl and sold by cartels, that's the real problem. You could address this by simply legalizing it across the board and saying, look, grow your own plants, smoke what you want, trade with your neighbors. Yeah, maybe you're better at growing indica and they're better at growing sativa or something like that. Have a little neighborhood syndicate for your weed. And then the little old lady down the street, she was a hippie back in the 1960s and she really knows how to cure that shit good. This is the kind of society that we need. Weed and machine guns, basically. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say these things. I've been quite consistent, I think. I applaud Trump for having the bravery, for being a Republican. A Republican, keep this in mind, you're a so-called conservative and coming out in favor of full legalization. You're going to face kickback from like the Cheneys and the Romneys of the party. You're like, no, don't legalize it yet. Decriminalize it a little bit and look the other way, but then we want to tax it. We want to tax the transaction. When you smoke weed, it must come from a government licensed dispensary, like a liquor store system. It must be government licensed. It must be taxed. Well, no, fuck that shit. Vermont has a working model. In the state of Vermont, you're allowed to grow up to 2 adult plants per person, and the police don't do anything about it. That's because it's just marijuana. Now, DUI still applies. If you're driving high, that can be a problem. Operating machinery, if you've got kids around, you're giving them weed or you're exposing them to it, those are all legally actionable. But if you're simply growing a small amount of weed for your own possession, and the only intent is to smoke it yourself, then it's perfectly legal. That's the system that the entire nation should be using. If you got rid of drug scheduling for marijuana at the federal level, states would be able to make their own laws. Now, most of them, eventually, they'll legalize them. Like, I think it finally got legalized in Ohio. I think it's on the ballot in 4 or 5 different states, actually, for the election. Make sure that you read the laws themselves, though, before you vote yay or nay. You need to be informed. Because like what Ohio tried to pull, this was years ago before they finally caved and just decriminalized it, basically. They were trying to make a system where weed would be legal, but you could only get it from a government-run dispensary. Which means it's overpriced, quality control will be good, but it'll be overpriced and it'll be highly regulated and taxed. And they're going to take your name down. They're going to know that you're smoking marijuana. So you're not going to be able to buy a gun or something like that. That was their original plan. Now this was nerfed. The people rejected it because they realized that it was a bad idea. What you should do is simply decriminalize. DUI and other laws apply to your usage of this substance. Otherwise, you can grow it, you can smoke it, you can trade it with friends, do whatever you want to do. You are an adult member of the militia and you have rights. You have the right to do what you want. What you want to do may not be good for you. Maybe you drink yourself to death. Maybe you chain smoke all day. Maybe you smoke a lot of weed and then you wander around and you don't even know where you are. But you're an adult. You're allowed to make those decisions. Government doesn't need to be our fucking nanny. It doesn't need to be our mama or dada. No, you've already got a mama and dada. They can influence you if they want, but they don't have the legal recourse to force you to do what they want, generally speaking, unless you're Britney Spears. The government doesn't need to babysit you. You're not a fucking baby. You're a fucking adult. Keep it away from the kids. Keep it off of the streets, so don't smoke and then go drive. Everything else should be kosher. Go ahead and do what you want. It's just like with smoking. You smoke wherever you want, but if you're in a car with a kid, you're not allowed to smoke in the car with a kid. That makes sense. They're not allowed to be exposed to that clam baking bullshit. I think that Trump has made an excellent decision with this. I think that it'll be meaningful actually within the election. I can't name another Republican actually who's run for the presidency other than Rand Paul actually championing such an idea. This is a great idea. Legalize it. That's what you need to do. That's about all. Peace out.